Welcome. It's wonderful to have such a fantastic turnout and to welcome Michael, Jack, and Emily. It's been an extraordinary day for our students, and I think it's an absolute delight and an honor to have you here with us in anticipation of Venice. I think the Venice Biennale is a funny fish in that it's a celebration of work that is either a long time in the making or far in the future. And I think what you have been doing today as perhaps a little anticipation of what we have to see in Venice is something that is immediate, is something that is participatory, that has involved certainly our students today. And there's nothing more refreshing than welcoming people into our kind of home, our funny row of Georgian terrace houses, in order to come together in unexpected ways. So tonight, I'm absolutely delighted to hear more about what you do, and I hope to see it in the flesh in Venice in just over a week, I'm afraid to say. But I'll hand over to Claire, and who's made all of this possible for us. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ingrid. Good evening. My name is Claire Potter, and I'm head of the Writing Centre at the AA. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to a work that has been more than 65,000 years in the making. In welcoming you to this evening's lecture, I would also like to extend this welcome to Professor Emily McDaniel, Dr Michael Mossman, and Jack Gillmer-Lilley, First Nations co-directors of the Australia Pavilion at this year's Venice Biennale. I'm deeply grateful to them for accepting the invitation to be with us this evening. Before introducing and handing over to them, I would also like to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of country, the continent now called Australia. I express gratitude to elders and knowledge holders whose wisdom, actions, knowledge have kept culture alive. I recognise First Nation people's ongoing commitment, connection, and caring of country, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and extend this respect to all First Peoples. Helping make this evening possible was AA tutor Richard Ainer, students Shinsi Freya Lay, Sam Alexander, Peter Svin, Harriet Jennings, Molly Evans in public program, and AA maintenance. Sincere thanks for the generosity of time offered. 500 years ago, a hypothetical country was thought to exist in the Southern Hemisphere. In Europe, it was known as Terra Australis Incognita, meaning unknown southern land. At this time, the unknown land was home already to one of the oldest continuous living cultures in the world. A culture spanning more than 400 different language groups and clans. In 1778, the unknown southern land became a British colony, Australia. The question of known and unknown brings us to the difference between a house and a home. We think of Bedford Square, where we sit this evening, and the facade of uniform coherence given in the 1770s to the surface of its Georgian homes. The work we are going to discover this evening connects us to the concept of home through a First Nations lens, not as enclosure or ephemerality, but as something akin to a connective tissue that breathes life into all surrounding forms. It rejuvenates an experience of home as a place of comings and goings, of living memories and traces. The sensorial, the material, and the invisible are one. The space of being is given a tactile home. Let me introduce Emily, Michael, and Jack to you. Dr Michael Mossman is a Kikuyu Yalanji man who teaches and researches at the University of Sydney School of Architecture, Design and Planning. He is an architect who champions country, First Nations cultures as agents for structural change in the broader architectural profession at educational, practice and policy levels. Professor Emily McDaniel is a Wiradjuri woman from the Kalari Lachlan River and a Professor of Practice in the School of Architecture at the University of Technology, Sydney. Her curatorial practices employ country-centred methodologies and actively engages with truth-telling and storytelling in collaboration with First Nations communities, creative practitioners, architects and designers. Jack Gillmer-Lilley is a Wiradjuri and Burupi Guri, an Associate and First Nations Lead at SJB Architecture, Sydney. Jack's interests are in the intersection of cultural knowledge systems and the built environment, and seeks to enable country as a co-designer and collaborator of narrative and architectural approaches to place. In the spirit of welcome, I'd like to hand this evening's lecture over to Emily, Michael and Jack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we test that this is on? I've never used, not sure if I am using this correctly. Yeah,
hello.
Okay. Thanks so much, Claire. I think that's a really amazing introduction that you've just provided. And to be here at the AA, it's a wonderful occasion. And to carry out a couple of workshops earlier today with students from the AA to really engage and interact and provide a learning experience for all of us was certainly something that I'll take away, and I think we'll all take away as a group and share with the rest of our collective. So, as Claire mentioned in her acknowledgement, it's such an important part of process in terms of how we, situate or locate ourselves wherever we may be. From Australia, there's many different nation groups and many different cultures and cultural practices that have been present as original custodians of those lands for thousands of years. And it's something that is part of practice every time that we engage in a space, in a new place, in a place that we know very dearly. And acknowledgement is very important to present. And as we move forward, the way that we speak tonight is all about acknowledging where we come from, our cultural practices, what is important to us, our family, our communities, and this notion of country. And in an overarching sense, in relation to the Venice Architecture Biennale, our theme of home represents all of these things about how we connect with each other through this notion of home and how important that is to all of us. In many different ways, and how we can build relationships with each other by finding out more about what home means to each of us. We have come together as a creative director group, and it first started in August last year. There was a call out by the Australian Institute of Architects to put forward an expression of interest for the creative directorship for the Australia Pavilion. And there was a series of WhatsApp messages that happened over a 24-hour period. First started with Jack, who, me being based in Sydney, Jack was in Paris at the time, talking about how we can sort of build something or build a team that could come together as a collective, which is one of the Biennale themes, and arrive at a proposition that could be impactful and tell our stories and share knowledge and exchange knowledge with many different guests who come and visit the pavilion So it was Emily that came on board, and as the creative directors, we've been present in these types of presentations to tell this story, and for it to be such an important story to tell for you all here, and how we can build connections with you through the presentation that we have tonight. We also have a larger group of 7 of us, and we'll go through that broader group in a moment. But I think that's, there's this important conversation that we want to share with you tonight, and how we can present that on a global stage in Venice, in the Australia Pavilion, for those who come in to visit and experience the space that we have. Next slide.
Before we go, we might also introduce ourselves too, because
I was really hesitant.
Look, we've been on an island for a month together. We've been covered in plaster. We've been covered in rammed earth. This is the first moment we have worn elegant clothes to talk to someone outside of the creative sphere. So bear with us tonight. That's the context we're coming to you with.
We've done this presentation about 10, 15 times, and each time it's different.
Yeah.
Of course.
But we always have good, and this is a good story to take away from it. And there's always stories to tell that come from this presentation. We originally did this. We have a colleague here, Kate, who's part of the Kate Goodwin, who's part of the curatorial committee, and we did it in 15 minutes. We have a bit more time to spend on it tonight with you. And the story with this image, for instance, to go off on a bit of a tangent, is that
We're going to go on many tangents and tell many stories.
The jacket that I'm wearing...
I'm still covered in plaster.
The jacket that I'm wearing, I think Emily has described it as boss, which for almost 50 years old is not a term that I'm familiar with. It's an intergenerational thing. So that when I told that to my children who are in the audience tonight, they're teenagers, about this, using this word boss, and they were like, "Oh, that's such a millennial thing to say."
Yeah.
So it's all this whole intergenerational exchange that's taking place just alone through this.
And that was directed
image.
at me, and I was really insulted.
Yes, we said that this was a very capital A architect photo of power. But essentially, what is more important than anything else is this very relationship of how we speak to each other and how we hold respect. And what you will hear over the next hour is how we consistently return back to that. And it was such a wonderful, generous introduction that you offered. And in hearing Claire speak about us, which is how we ask to be described, you'll hear that we don't say what our profession is first, because for us that is the least interesting thing in this space. For us, we bring our cultural selves first and foremost. Me as a Wiradjuri woman from the Kalari, the Lachlan River, I don't consider myself Aboriginal or First Nations. I'm Wiradjuri. And that's the worldview that I bring to this project. And the least interesting part of that is I have a curatorial background, which I think is a very nice, neat way to say I'm a storyteller. And why we've got this incredible team is because we all know that one person can't do everything. We all have a role to play. And part of working together as a good community is knowing what is that you offer and bringing that with a whole heart. So that's also my cultural introduction.
Wiyabulnyura, Nyata Jack, Nyata Waramai Birapai Guru. Hello all, my name's Jack Waramai Birapai fella. The language I just shared with you is Gatung, and that's part of my language group. So that belongs to 3 different nations of Australia, or what they, so-called Australia, which is the Waramai, Birapai and Guringai. People speak that language or dialect. And I'd just like to express that, kind of like what you were saying, like I'm not an Aboriginal man, I'm a Waramai and Birapai man of the Gatung language group. And that's a really important thing to express because, you know, we do come from a variety of different backgrounds. It'd be like when I was in Paris, the way I explained it to people was, oh, you're not Parisian, you're European. And like the insult that would give someone that's from Paris was like, wow. And I was like, you can't say that. It's like, oh, okay, whoops. But I'm also a second generation immigrant Pommy. I don't know if I can say the word Pommy either, can I? I don't know. So my mum was born in, I just did, so I said what I said. My mum was born in Manchester and she immigrated to Australia. So, you know, that's something that I often reckon with in my practice as an architect. And a lot of that and a lot of the research that I did through the Galang residency, which is why I was based in Paris last year for 3 months, has led to some of the conceptualization around this project, which is really exciting and perhaps something that could be kind of held within these institutional spaces.
So this is the broader collective, the creative sphere, the three of us on the front row, and the standing from the left is Clarence Slockey, who's horticulture. It sort of has a high profile in Australia as a presenter on a show called Gardening Australia. So it's very, and he's a real character. We also have Kaylee Salvatore, who's a landscape architect, Ali Davidson, who's a planner, and Bradley Kerr, who is an architect. We all come from different backgrounds and different cultural backgrounds. And in that sense, you know, that it provides very interesting and stimulating conversations between us in the way that we interact and acknowledge all of our cultural backgrounds. And that in turn informs the ways that we interact, that we practice, the way that we practice in our industry. And more holistically as well, about how we sort of break down those boundaries between those professions and between those disciplines. And with that holistic approach, it's about how, you know, it's how we're really celebrating the ways that we can approach these disciplines with culture in mind and integrating culture, integrating cultural practices, integrating the stories that are part of place, that are part of the histories and narratives that can really enrich the way that these projects are telling these stories, and the way then that people and visitors and non-human kin are interacting with these places in a built environment sense.
So the process begins with conversation and positionality. Like we all said, who we are and where we are from. And then we sat together and we pondered collectively around this complex yet so simple concept of home. And what I've really been reminded of over the last couple of weeks is that to ask someone, what does home mean to you, can be a really confronting question. It's both a very simple answer, yet so complex. It requires vulnerability, honesty, and self-reflection, which is a lot to ask of someone, so we first asked it to each other. What does home mean to us? And what we're looking at here are beautiful images that Kaylee Salvatore, one of our Creative Sphere members, drew up in response to that. When we started thinking, what can home mean? It cannot simply be defined as a place, as a site. It can be a feeling, it can be a behaviour, it can be nostalgia, it can be a memory that suddenly moves through your body. Home can mean many different things, and our responses and reflections from this question have changed constantly. But what it also gave us was something that we can all speak to. And every single person in this room could speak to that concept. Every single person here has a connection to that story. And we knew that we wanted to bring something to audiences where we focused on what our connections are, how we shared something, not the differences, but to lean into the space in between. And I want to return to a phrase that we've just said, and we will say again. Country. And if I were to say it here, I'm not speaking of England, Britain, United Kingdom. I'm not speaking the notion of a large group of people. When we speak of country, it's a complex term. It's landscapes, it's skyscapes, it's waterscapes. It's memories, it's stories. It's people who have been before us, the people who have not yet to come. It's the seasons, it's the constellations, it's human kin, it's non-human kin, all held equally, without hierarchy, each of equal importance. So when we acknowledge country, we're not acknowledging a landscape, we're acknowledging everything that landscape is connected to, and everyone is part of it. Communities and people are just as important as landscapes. So that's a term that collectively, and even the three of us here from different nations, different clan groups, we share and say that word. Where's your country? And when we acknowledge country, we're demonstrating that respect. And so home reflects upon country in many different facets. And this, again, beautiful illustration from Kaylee Salvatore reflects an obligation and responsibility. Home is a big project, it's a big concept to bring to people, but essentially we impart one question, which is what impact might it have if we designed for the places we're imparted opportunity for, places that we pass through, places that we inhabit? What if our relationship to each of them was based upon home? You had obligation and responsibility, love for. How might that raise our collective approach to architecture, to design, to creating communities? That's been the concept that we've chosen to put forward on an international scale, to say this is the one thing that we feel Australia can offer to the world and the lesson that we can impart.
So one of the questions that we kind of talked about as a team of the creative sphere, the seven of us, is this provocation from Carlo Ratti. Carlo Ratti is the overall curator of the Venice Biennale this year. So he goes out and he curates the Arsenale kind of galleries or galley spaces as well. And he asked all of the international pavilions, one place, one solution. If every country brings one success to the table, together we can assemble a global kit for adapting to the future. So as Emily's just kind of hinted to then, what can we as the Australia Pavilion bring to the table at the Venice Biennale on the international stage that no other country can? And that is the world's oldest living culture and our ways of being and practicing. So through a lot of our conversations as part of the creative sphere, I think the first video meeting we had, the seven of us were in there, we're all kind of scattered around Australia and the globe. And Brad was sitting in the room. He wasn't sitting in he was actually sitting in a corridor space, a hallway in a hospital, because his wife just gave birth and he had a 16-hour-old baby on his hip in this meeting, kind of talking about, what does this project mean? What can we offer to the world that can benefit everybody? And our team expands kind of further than the creative sphere. So we're talking about this intergenerational kind of knowledge exchange and kind of extended team members that have now become part of this project. And Kaylee Salvatore, she had a week-old baby as well as part of this process. So, we have all these babies that are also kind of contributing to what home means, which is, I found kind of really exciting and unique, and a position or a project that we haven't had the opportunity to do that with so far. So this kind of global kit for adapting to the future, what we want to express within our proposal is something that might be at the beginning of this global kit, which is relating and connecting as people. And for people to, ask each other, where are you from? What's your story? What does home mean to you? Kind of building those relationships and that rapport with each other, because not only in architecture, but other disciplines, globally, there's a disconnect between people, and we want to bring that back to the forefront of the way that we practice. So in my practice, I try to have these conversations, or what we call these yarns, where you put down your barriers, you drop the hierarchies. There's shared values and principles that are established through sharing these stories that you start to really understand the people that you're working with and collaborating with, so you can actually move forward with projects, not just in architecture, with a sense of shared custodianship within that project and shared story as well. So everybody feels like they have agency within that project, and everybody wants to work more collaboratively, kind of moving forward within those projects as well. One of the other things we thought was, we're designing in a square box in Venice that feels very kind of out of place. Effectively, it's this institutional kind of box that we're trying to design something in. Like, how do we express this? How do we have these conversations within this space? And we thought, okay, we're in this square room. If we're going to be having these conversations, how are people going to naturally congregate? You know, how are they going to come together? And it's not just an Aboriginal thing. I think it's a human thing that we'll always gather around a campfire when we're out camping. We'll always gather in a circle to kind of have shared voices and agency within that space. So that's why we've created this circle, which holds the space. And we're not trying to, I guess, kind of express like this false sense of Australiana either. It's the earth that we're creating that bounds this space, which we're calling the ceremonial space, is made out of local Venetian kind of clays and soils and granites, and we're kind of binded that to create this space to hold ceremony. And so filling it with sand is an invitation for people to take off their shoes, take off their socks, put that aside, come in and kind of create a footprint within the space.
It was really interesting when it was an interview that we did not that long ago, and someone said, how are you going to bring a sense of ceremony to the Venice Biennale? How will you describe and express what ceremony is? And I thought, the Venice Biennale happens every second year. And people all across the world travel to this one place with this one intention to reflect collectively and share this moment. I thought, you all know what ceremony is. It is a ceremony. The entire Venice Biennale is a ceremony. So these things we all collectively hold. We gather in these circular forms. We ask Claire, can we have a slight round to the chairs in this room, because we know it makes for better conversations. It's a logic that we all share that we haven't become disconnected from. So it's about leaning into audiences, reminding that these are shared spaces.
And then this final, I guess, concept model of our approach just expresses the multi-sensory experiences that we want people to experience within this new space that we're creating within the Australia Pavilion. So we're looking at different soundscapes as part of our proposal, different scentscapes, different tactile opportunities, which you can see on the background here. So these are these plaster of Paris, yes, right? I always get the two mixed. So it's either plaster of Paris or Paris of plaster, just depending on how my brain's operating at the time. We'll just call it pop from now on, because then I don't need to worry about getting those words mixed over. So it's through these kinds of systems, which might come a little bit later through some prototyping, that we're trying to engage with people's kind of remnant memories of their pasts within this space. So for me, as instance, my smell is my strongest scent, the strongest kind of sense that I engage with, that really brings memories to the forefront of my mind, that then I will want to share in this space as well. So I might smell something while I'm also looking at this kind of tactile wall that's representing kind of visual cues for people to be able to talk about their homelands or their landscapes, country, what home means to them.
So one of the first prototypes that we started to look at was to do with the rammed earth structure, which was the slide model that Jack just presented. But it was really amazing to hold the material and to sense the quality of it as you're building. And as something as in industry and working in architecture or in academia, is you lose sight of that, or you lose sight of actually engaging directly with materials as a builder would do, or as a rammed earth specialist would do. And we were in this fortunate situation with the University of Sydney was able to provide the space for us to really engage in these prototypes and to really test some of these ideas about how we can put these things together. The rammed earth requires a formwork, a series of formworks that's important to hold it and create the forms. And to the right there was an example of one of the first ones that I did that was created from soil from my backyard. It was just a case of I was digging trenches with my plumber, and we had some material there, so I used it. It had a good clay content, and it really formed up something that was quite provided a good learning experience. And that's the main thing from this making process. You learn stuff along the way. You can do it all. You can do it as much as you want on the computer, but until it actually becomes something that you work with in reality, then you'll learn so much more when you're actually doing that.
Another one of the key prototype elements is this, what we're calling the living cloak. It's this plywood structure that wraps around the kind of internal skin of the Australia Pavilion, and it holds our plaster of Paris panels, our pop panels. I'm going to use pop. And we worked really closely with Daniel Burt, who's a student at the University of Sydney, on this kind of prototyping of this plywood structure, and also Matthew Higginbottoms, who's a fabricator that me and Emily have worked with in the past for other exhibitions as well. And this whole structural system goes together without any adhesives, any metals, fixings, screws, you name it. It kind of goes together with this really kind of intricate system that kind of locks in place just with different radiuses and pressures and kind of different moments of compression that just locks it all to kind of be this freestanding element. And we're just, in a way, trying to reframe through materiality more sustainable practices within exhibition spaces as well. So this thing can be taken apart, re-established in another exhibition space, and then used again and over again as well. So this is the pop prototyping that we've done as well. So some of the first prototyping I did was in Paris last year when I was based there. And on the left kind of expresses some of those different visual cues that we're trying to establish within the Biennale space. So on the left, for instance, what I pick up from and what I really expressed within the pouring of this particular panel was the Karoo River, which is the river that my family are from. So we're Garawagal people, that's the clan name of my people, and that's the Karoo River, and there's moments on there where our communities are from and where our stories kind of come from as well, that then leads to the Pacific Ocean. So other people might pick up on different kind of visual elements as well. So I pick up on river systems through there, but other people might pick up on ocean kind of landscapes or mountain landscapes or kind of snowy regions as well. So it's really up for interpretation. And I think it's within the multi-sensory experience. So while you're looking at that, when you smell a certain scentscape that might be in the space, something else might come to mind as well.
So I am an academic at the University of Sydney and School of Architecture, Design and Planning, as Claire mentioned. And when we first proposed this theme of home, one of the key exercises that and inclusions that was part of this exhibition was to provide space for students in architecture and design, allied disciplines, to create expressions that are then exhibited in the space. So it's very much about being a forward, future-focused exhibition where we have these sort of monumental elements that sit in the space, the rammed earth and the pop panels. And then how we can sort of juxtapose that with these really fine living belongings is what we call them. So they're little creations that belong to someone. And the story behind them is that the students are telling or giving their version of what does home mean to them. So what does home mean to them through this process of making and then arriving through process, arriving at this belonging that is telling a story or telling many stories. And it's all about cultures, it's all about place, it's all about stories, of language, of experiences, of challenges, of opportunities that have come forward. That's a big part of the practice that I do as an academic. It's like I'm not an academic that sits in a vacuum and we're completely objective to the information that we're sharing, but I have a story to tell, and I have many stories that make up who I am. And it's very important to share that. As Kuki Yalanji, I have many different connections to other tribal groups. I'm born and raised in a place called Gillmer-Lilley, which is a place named Cairns in far north Queensland. And I've had many experiences that I share. And that comes across, and there's a certain sense of vulnerability as an academic when you actually do that. and you tell those stories to your students, because it's like, you're trying to create something and break down barriers between, this position of perceived authority, as opposed to let's create a connection and arrive at something together as a collaboration. And you as a student have agency in the story that you want to tell. And that's what we arrived at with this proposition, where we engaged with 11 universities from around Australia. It's like the biggest sort of collaboration, in a university sense that's been done, and very much focused on how can students respond to that question of what does home mean to them, go through a process that is informed by country and thinking and approaches, and then produce a living belonging that's telling these stories, and then be exhibited at the Venice Architecture Biennale. And it's just amazing, there's 125 students in total from these 11 universities, and we're able to get so many, varied stories and narratives of who these students are, where they've come from, what they're, how they exist within their communities. That is such a compelling notion of how we can really promote this methodology, in a sort of future-focused way. So these are a few of the examples that that some of the students arrived at, and it's just really inspiring, to go through this type of process, and I'm sure for the Emily and Jack as well.
I will mention what's really quite extraordinary about this is that all students were briefed on the fact that your living belonging will be handled by any visitors that move through the exhibition. They've been designed to be held, to be cared for, to be looked at, and that's something quite extraordinary. I want you to reflect on cultural institutions, living belongings, cultural belongings, objects. Position the British Museum in your mind. Position the Tate, and what might happen if you invited the entire audience, visitors, communities, general public, to hold their objects. Yes, there may be a conservational risk, but would it increase public connection and sentiment and understanding and relationships with cultural belongings? It might. So when we think about preciousness, it doesn't mean don't touch. Often the most special objects that we know in our lives are the things we use the most. A cutlery set that your grandparents gave that you use every day is imbued with those memories. It could be a cheap wooden spoon that you recall every single meal that your mother cooked. Objects that we use every day are precious. And so, yes, there's a conservational risk. Something might break. But what might happen to a community if we're no longer allowed to connect with our cultural belongings? I think there's a greater risk when access is too mediated. So in a large expression and gesture of this, we're going to entrust the general public. I stand by it because any risk will be completely outbalanced by the impact that can be created when you hold something in your hands, the same way Michael spoke about working with that rammed earth. It's really critical.
We did instruct, as part of those instructions, that it was to be robust, and not everybody followed that. So it's
it's on them, not us, is what we're saying. Very publicly, it's on them, not us. But we feel that that's a really important gesture to bring to this, that it isn't about didactic panels, it's about feeling. It's about feeling and sense. But now we're in the middle of this install when all of our big ideas hit reality on the ground. And so we've been joined by a number of students from University of Sydney who've really helped in this process. And it has been laborious. We start to sit within this challenge of what it is to articulate these grand gestures and notions within a physical space, because at the end of the day, that is what we are sharing. The rammed earth has been an incredibly physical process.
And I think that's important to recognise. We put our hand up to say we have been fully engaged with this project and committed to the way that we've approached the prototyping, and we want to be involved in the build. We want to get our hands dirty, and all of our DNA is in these elements. It's very present. It's part of the story of this exhibition, and the students, 2 of them participated in the intensive and have belongings, and another one who we've just established an amazing relationship, who's studying architecture, was a former carpenter, and has provided amazing advice for us and actions.
So that image on the right, Daniel is the one on the left. So he's the one that couldn't participate in the living belonging creation, but he's effectively built our exhibition. So we're saying the exhibition is his living belonging, and all the students' living belongings exist within his living belonging.
But that's also been a really special thing, for you to work alongside students, where within a university it might seem quite hierarchical, the knowledge flow that moves through that institution. But within this space, we were all learning in awe from Daniel's long knowledge. It was a reciprocity and a two-way learning that has happened within this space.
And the rammed earth was humbling. Just to go back to it, we designed the rammed earth and we didn't realise how much effort and energy you had to put into creating that thing. We had to mix it downstairs and wheelbarrow it 100 metres maybe to take it upstairs to the pavilion space, and it was a lot of work. This is us doing some prototyping of the pop panels. We did some more prototyping today with the students from Architectural Association, which was really exciting. A lot of lessons were learnt. There were stories shared and expressed, and I think the memory of a lot of these students and ourselves as well has been left in the gallery space just over to the left or your right over there. So this is us doing some in Venice, and that image on the top left is me and Kien. So Kien's an incredible artist and one of the students as well who's created this beautiful living belonging. He's a bit of a plaster expert, and that's just us showing a bit of mutual respect, having a handshake with our hands covered in plaster.
It's quite biblical in a way, almost reaching out across the divide of learning and plaster. And so this is really a moment where we all come together and our ideas are met with reality. And the reality is this: the Australia Pavilion. As you look at it, it is a big black box. It is somewhat intimidating the way it greets you as you move toward it. One thing we really wanted to honour was actually a big question, really. I mentioned earlier how we acknowledge country within Australia. We acknowledge that entirety of place and memory. We do that when we go overseas as well. We think, what is the greatest story here? What are the stories? What are the memories? What are the materials? And we knew that we didn't want to create, as you said before, a false sense of Australiana, that you walk amongst the doors and you're immediately situated with Australia. We wanted to recognise the canal location that we were in. Our pavilion is in an infinite dialogue with the waters of Venice. So we ensured that they had a part to play within our project. We worked with local materials that created our rammed earth and our sand. We worked with local manufacturers, and we've considered this holistic approach to material where we will have the lightest touch. Rammed earth can be crumbled and returned back to situ. It is completely respectful to that place. And not only are we creating a place of materiality, but one that is of conversation, just as this project started. So we intend to fill that ceremonial ground with critical conversations that draw out threads of knowledge and contemplation, that really complex idea of what home might mean. So every day during the vernissage and during the opening week at 2 p.m, we will be holding critical conversations within our space, drawing out those threads, architects of the future, really looking back to the student intensive and the impact and what a future might be. Water as an interface, the collective story, and how we might enact a place's memory through story, song, and movement. The conversations are just as important as anything else within this space. And that's something that we really want to emphasise within this project, is can we conceive and respect of a methodology whereby the conversations, the yarns, the jokes, the Zoom meetings, the texts are all of equal importance to the built environment. So this is home. As you walk in, you'll be met with a monolithic rammed earth wall that will guide your movement around to this ceremonial ground. Everything in this place is designed for you to feel, not just with your emotions, but with your hands, with your feet. Nothing is too precious that you cannot interact with, because we value you in our space just as much as anything else. Home provides this large provocation. It's not just describing a place, it's describing our connections and what our obligations might be. We are entrusted to work in Venice, but we want to leave that site with the lightest, most respectful touch. Coming back to that overarching question, how might we better design for places if we were to consider them as our home, with obligation, with respect, with love, with kindness, with consideration? How might that create a better sense of community? So in this moment, we have mentioned that our exhibition is about enacting everyone as an active participant. You will leave a trace in this exhibition, whether it is your handprints, whether it is the trace of your feet. We all have a story to tell. We all have a connection to home. And to close, as you know, we like to upend hierarchies. We like circles. We like removing any sense of barrier. We like two-way learning. We won't be doing a question and answer, at least not questions from you to us, but we'll ask you to ask your own questions and your own answers. During the course of our conversation here, I'm sure you've sat there thinking what home might mean to you as a site, an action, a feeling, a behaviour. And in an act of vulnerability and trust, I'm going to ask that you turn to someone beside you and to share something of what that might be. And you'll decide. But the beauty of it here is we've all come together and we've all considered the same notion this evening. So we certainly have one thing in common today. So this has been about a gesture of us sharing what is to come, and in reality, it'll be so much better. But in this moment where all we have is our conversation, I ask you to be as generous as we have been, sharing our stories to each other. And we want to thank you for your time this evening. It has been really generous to be here in this place and to be given an opportunity in the midst of such a busy, hectic schedule to step back and say, what does it mean in this moment? So with that said, we'd like to thank you all for your time this evening. We'll draw this to a close. And once we do, the conversation goes back to you. Take this moment and express something that has been in your mind. Thank you so much.